Hello and welcome to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy,
And I'm Claire.
and we're here to talk about some of the disturbing things that go on in the world, past and present. We feel like not knowing doesn't mean the crazy doesn't exist.
So we're going to scar you with the knowing.
Enjoy. So, what do you got for us today, Claire?
Today's piece of shit is Ricky Ray Rector. Our where is going to be Arkansas in the 1980s.
All right. So, what this piece of shit do?
We'll get there. So Ricky would grow up in Conway, Arkansas. As a youth, he was described as different and strange, having few friends, more often opting to play under a tree with a stick instead of with other kids. Ricky would grow up being beaten mercilessly by his dad. So naturally, we've seen you have a rough childhood. I mean, and that could have been why he was more withdrawn from other people too. Being by yourself is safer.
It's so sad.
Now, in school, he was slow and later on was diagnosed with a learning disability. So basically, since that was in school, not noticed. I do think that with the 80s, a lot of learning disabilities weren't even known. So I think he was just one of the forgotten kids. And then he was probably, I would imagine, real quiet because that's what I assumed. Now, by the time he's a junior, his print was comparable to a third grader. I thought that was like, I get that they're trying to paint the picture of he's this slow kid who don't read too well and he's not learning too well. But I can tell you, I've seen doctors' handwriting that's no better than a third grader.
Oh, that's what I was going to say, is maybe he was handwriting-wise training to be a doctor.
Yeah, so it's like, the article that I was reading was like, so that doesn't mean you're stupid.
No, it just means you ain't so good at the printing.
Now, as he reached adolescence, he would start getting into trouble, acting out, also has focusing issues. Eventually, he's going to take a turn towards violence and petty crimes, just a very angry young man. Now, that spirals into frequent arrests for those petty crimes. And then, what the day in his life that we're going to focus on is March 21st, 1981. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of, like we normally do, of Ricky's upbringing, kind of molded a...
Not a good feller, yeah.
Not that it gives him a right to do anything that he does.
Yeah.
Okay, so as he reaches adolescence, he'd start getting into trouble, acting out, blah, blah, blah. Takes a turn towards violence and petty crimes. Again, painting the picture, he's an angry young man. So it's not surprising when he starts getting arrested frequently for petty crimes. I feel like we've done enough cases that we know the path this leads towards.
Right.
But we're going to focus on one day in particular of Ricky's life. On March 21st, 1981, Ricky is outside of Tommy's old-fashioned home-style restaurant and dance hall when he gets mad when one of his friends can't pay the $3 cover charge and they refuse entry into that little dance hall.
I
know. Part of me was confused because why don't you pay his cover charge then?
Yeah, it's $3.
I guess whatever argument, since his friend didn't have it, he thought he should be able to get in anyway.
That's not how it works.
Well, evidently Ricky thought that's the way it should. So I don't know what words were transpired, but that's what was said, is that's what this all starts over. Ricky whips out a .38 pistol from his waistband and starts randomly shooting. 2 people would be wounded. 1 received a fatal shot to the forehead and neck. Arthur Criswell would die.
Oh, gosh.
After this sea of bullets, Ricky took off in his friend's car, going down alleys, making big circles around the city over the next few days. Which, by the way, I'd be super pissed if I was the friend, because I'd be like, he just fucking took off in my car after shooting these people.
And left me, yeah. Actually, you know what, though? I don't think I'd want to go with him. So, you know what? Go ahead and take my car. Get the hell away.
I feel like he could just go on foot. Go on now, get. I'm not saying you'd have to go with him, but he just took your car.
But if he's wielding a weapon and wants to take my car, I'm not putting up a fight.
Fine.
Take the car, get as far away from me as possible.
Fine.
I don't want to be on your bad side.
He sleeps in the car, he's on the run. The police are looking for him over these several days. He's eventually going to make his way back home to his sister and mother. Now, he would tell them what he did, and they would convince him that the only way to get out of this was to turn himself in. Now, mind you, the police are hunting him actively. I don't know why nobody was at the house or like posted out there. I feel like if you kill somebody, the police weren't there when he got home, so mom and sister, so they'd convince him to turn himself in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, Ricky's mom would call Officer Bob Martin, who was a family friend and who was trusted. Now, Officer Martin had known Ricky since he was just a boy, so him being a kind man, if anyone was going to bring Ricky in, he was the man to do it because he wouldn't have been scared of him. Now, Officer Martin was the kind of patrolman that made a point of getting to know people because he felt that since it's his job to swear or to protect them, he also wants to know who's in his area so he knows when something's not good. But very cool officer. Now, mind you, Ricky is considered armed and dangerous, so bringing him in safely is, again, going to be Officer Martin, the only one that's probably going to be able to do it because Ricky, at this point, I would think Ricky is pretty shaky. He's been on the run for a few days, so he needs a familiar face.
Yeah.
Now, Officer Martin heads to Ricky's mom's house in uniform around 3 p.m. He sits down in the living room, proceeds to talk politely to Ricky's mom, sister, and his nephew as they wait for Ricky to come on in. Now, Ricky comes in walking from the back of the house, approaches Officer Martin from behind, pulls out his gun, and shoots him twice, hitting him in the neck and the jaw. He then takes off, exiting out the front door into the street past his nephew's wife, and says, "I just shot that cop." But this time, instead of him keeping his running up, he puts the gun to his forehead and pulls the trigger. The bullet exits out the front part of his brain, and he crumples onto the floor, or the ground, the road, the street, whatever.
Oh my gosh.
Sadly, I know I didn't figure you'd see that one coming.
I sure didn't, because we're a few minutes in, and not only has he done murdered people or shot people, but now he's shot himself. When you said this was a quick case, you weren't lying.
Now, sadly, Officer Martin did not survive the gunshot wounds.
Oh my gosh.
And that's our case.
Lies.
Yeah, I did write in, just kidding. Ricky would still be alive. The officers would find him in the street, rush him into surgery where doctors would remove roughly 1/3 of his brain, which had been damaged by the gunshot wound, and then cleaned it up and closed it. It was a classic prefrontal lobotomy that would leave Ricky barely functional. Mind you, he was never particularly functional anyway, but now he was considered to have the mental capacity of a 6-year-old. Now, his sister would assume that that would mean he'd be institutionalized for life. Now, the people of Arkansas, however, they wanted justice for the crimes Ricky had committed and the lives that he took. Now, an expert for the state would testify that Ricky was competent to stand trial, so they would proceed to trial. Ricky's first trial would be for the murder of Arthur Criswell, the first person he killed. The jury would convict him of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment on September 28th, 1981. Now, prison staff would say that Ricky would smile all the time, scream, yell, laugh, bark, and bay for no apparent reason. He would also dance and finger snap to himself in his cell, which I was like, he's clearly enjoying prison time. Now, Ricky's sister Stella would visit him, and he would tell her that there were snakes that slithered across his bed.
What?
That alligators and chickens in his cell that the guards would put there.
All right.
And I can only imagine she does a lot of blinking. Now, on one visit, Stella would tell Ricky that her brother, or that his brother died, or their brother died. He didn't have a reaction at all, but he would ask her if she saw all the monkey smoke in there.
What?
And then started pacing like an animal. Yeah, right, exactly. Doesn't seem like he's all there. Now, then Ricky's mom would die, and his attorney would let him know. Now, mind you, him and his mom had a special bond.
They always do.
He had no reaction to being told his mom was dead. He just said, "She is?" followed by, "When's dinner?"
Sorry.
Now,
It's
his sister...
not funny, but...
I know. Now, his sister was permitted to take him to the funeral home to see her body, where he burst out laughing when he saw her and said, "Yep, that's her all right. She's dead."
Wow. All right.
So, now it didn't take Stella long to realize that Ricky might look like her brother, but he sure wasn't there anymore. Her brother died with a gunshot wound to his head. Now, Ricky, his second trial would begin September 18th, 1982, just a year after his first trial. Now, this time for capital murder of Officer Martin. Now, the defense would once again try to determine Ricky's competency. They would have a hearing in October where 4 psychologists for the state and 2 for the defense, and Ricky's attorney and his sister would all speak at that hearing. Basically, there are going to be conflicting opinions on whether Rickety, well, he is rickety, whether Ricky was competent to stand trial. The state's experts would say that, well, one of them at least, would say that they thought Ricky was faking it and he was perfectly fine to stand trial.
He had a freaking lobotomy.
The defense would have a doc that would say his linguistic capabilities were so primitive, and on top of that, he struggled with basic motor skills to even pick up coins, and that it was impossible for Ricky to fake them at the lengths that they were for all the examinations that they had seen. Now, the docs for the state would say that Ricky had no problem with communicating and there wasn't a reason he couldn't help his defense team, to which the defense would say back, "Yeah, so Ricky doesn't have any memory at all of the incident or the whole the reason why he's there. So how the hell is he supposed to help with his defense? And on top of that, if they ask him any questions, he has weird ass responses. So he's not help."
No.
Now, the judge would ultimately determine that once again, Ricky is competent to stand trial, so they would proceed with trial number 2. He would be found guilty. He would be sentenced to death by electrocution. Now, that was in November 1982. Now, when the jury left and the judge, Ricky would turn and ask, "Does this mean I'll get a television in my cell now?" Now, other inmates on death row figured something was wrong with him. When the lights would go out, he would start screaming because he was afraid of the dark. So since he was waking everybody up, the inmates started giving him their meds in hopes to calm him down so he would shut the fuck up at night.
Wow.
Now, the prison chaplain would say the first time that he met Ricky, he was clinging to the cell bars, howling and jumping around, saying there were Indians in the corner of his cell who he was busy hunting. So the chaplain would leave and then come back 3 weeks later to talk to him since he was busy that day. And this time he was hiding by his bunk because he feared that someone was going to kill him. And I feel like this one, the inmates probably did want to kill him.
Because he was making it so they didn't get no nut.
I don't even know how he was awake all the time. During the day, he's hunting all sorts of shit, and then at night, he's screaming. Now, Ricky would have an execution date set several times while his appeals dwindled down and came to a point of exhaustion. With the state still claiming he was normal enough for execution, his date was set for January 1992. Ricky's last hope was the mercy of Governor Bill Clinton. As the date of execution approached, Governor Clinton found himself fighting a scandal in the midst of his presidential candidacy campaign.
Sorry.
This is not the one that you think it is, because that shit happened while he was president.
I know.
An Arkansas woman came forward saying that the governor and her had a 12-year-long affair and she had the audio tapes to prove it. Now, Governor Clinton was in a close race with the Massachusetts senator at the time and didn't want to take a political risk of granting clemency to Ricky. Now, I'm going to take a little pause there because I know how you love history lessons, but we're going to have a little history lessons for you on Governor Clinton. Clinton's first term as governor was from 1978 to 1980. He commuted 70 prison sentences during that first chunk, so in a span of 2 years. Then when he was up for re-election, he would lose to Frank White, who had the position of being tough on crime. Now, good old Bill would head back to his mansion, crybabying, and spend his time rethinking his next campaign because, mind you, he has his sights set on presidency and he was just kicked in the nads over this one. Now, he would take the stance of being tough on crime the next go round and win the election and remain governor of Arkansas from 1982 to 1992. Interestingly enough, when he gets back into the governor's office, he would only commute 7 prisoners during that time, so clearly he's taken a different approach. Now, since we're by 1992, he had set 70 execution dates for 20 different inmates. 4 of those dates were for Ricky. Then he would have the bragging rights of saying, "Look at all these execution orders I've done."
Is that really bragging rights, though? I mean, I guess.
It was, because they're tough on crime. Like, I haven't commuted shit, but look at all these execution dates because we're going to get shit done. So then we have the presidential nominations come into the picture, and he's super stressed, and I'm sure it's a lot of pressure. Even more when you have Jennifer coming out saying they carried on a 12-year-long affair. So naturally, Governor Clinton wasn't concerned about Ricky and his case for clemency. He doesn't need that on his plate. He's got a whole lot, and that's not even factoring Hillary. Now, Ricky's attorney, who just happened to be an old friend of the Clintons, would try to call him up and talk to him, because he thought for sure that Clinton didn't understand Ricky's current condition. He would repeatedly call his home to talk to him. Now, all of his calls would go unanswered and unreturned. He wasn't the only one to reach out to the Clintons. The wife of the pastor that married the Clintons, one of the psychiatrists that met with Ricky, and even Jesse Jackson would reach out to the governor in hopes of changing his position on Ricky's clemency. All had the stance that executing Ricky was no different than executing a child.
Right, but he wasn't a child when he committed his crimes. He wasn't childlike minded. So put a fork in him, he's done.
So that was what the state, like a lot of supporters would say also, is that he wasn't childlike when he committed it. It's just, and I have mixed feelings.
Well, you're wrong.
Well, they're my own. They are not wrong. They're mine. But I have mixed feelings because initially when I was reading this case, I was like, fry the sumbitch. I don't care. But then at the same time, it's just, this gets sadder and sadder, and
put him out of his misery.
We'll get there. So in one call with Jesse Jackson, Clinton would say, he's been researching various ways to get around it, but it just couldn't be done. There were doctors who'd said he was competent, but he'd prey on it. Of course, all that was a fib. Governor Clinton absolutely had the power to commute Ricky's sentence to life imprisonment. He was just opting not to. So that execution date would be drawn even closer. Ricky's attorney, still not able to talk to Billy Boy, would go on TV and explain that the governor was not taking his calls. Shortly after that, Clinton would call him up, and he would have the opportunity to explain that it was all a horrible misunderstanding, that Ricky was a zombie-like, and his execution couldn't and should not be done, that he's a child. His execution would also be remembered as a disgrace to the state. After listening, Governor Clinton would hang up with a non-committal pleasantry. I don't know what he said, but I feel like, fuck you, click.
Because it was a pleasantry, I'd assume it was more like, well, thanks for your opinion. Have you a blessed day.
We'll have to agree to disagree.
Maybe that's what he said when he got off the phone.
What?
We'll just have to agree to disagree.
Yeah, you know what that probably was. Click. Ricky's execution date arrived on January 24th, 1992. Clinton would actually head back to Arkansas in the middle of his presidential campaign to ensure that his execution would remain on schedule.
That's commitment.
The records of the prison would begin on the day of his execution at 6:46. Ricky would start howling. Then by 6:59, he would begin dancing in his cell. It wasn't long after his dancing routine that he would tell the guard, if you eat grass, lethal injection won't kill you.
Okay.
Now, his last meal, Ricky would ask for steak, fried chicken, Kool-Aid, and pecan pie. He would actually leave his pie on the side of his tray, telling the correctional officer who came to take him to the execution chamber that he's saving that for later, which...
Aw, that's sad.
Part of me was like, he was faking it and was just trying to go for life in prison. But this one, That's why I was saying I was trying to keep it in my mind that he did bad things, but it's just like he doesn't understand what's happening. And I think that so
Well,
far this is the only case that I've felt the whole, I don't know, this one doesn't seem right.
mm,
And Ricky would be brought into the execution chamber where medical staff struggled for over 50 minutes to find a vein. Now, while they were doing so, the curtain was still closed, but witnesses could say they would hear Ricky moaning. Now, the medical team would go from 2 to 5 people as they work on both sides of Ricky's body to find a vein, which is most likely the reason for his moaning. And I realize that doesn't sound like a huge deal, but 50 minutes of being poked?
yeah, that sucks.
Yeah. Now, apparently, the reason for that is while incarcerated, Ricky had gained a lot of weight, so they were really trying to dig deep. Now, Ricky would be executed by lethal injection, and they would not throw out his pie until after he was declared dead.
That's so sad.
I mean, like, that's why I said I felt. Because, again, part of me was doing the whole, when he was doing the howling and carrying on and just trying to be real crazy to get off on charges. Because I get it that some people try to fake it. And then you have so many times people try to say, oh no, I can't be tried. I'm not competent to stand trial. But it's just like, I feel like we were dealing with two different Rickies. Now, the Ricky who, if he wouldn't have shot himself and turned into Ricky number 2, I absolutely think he deserved to die. But I don't have any idea how he was even tried the first time. I don't know how one doctor talked to him and was like, he's competent to stand trial.
So I realize that I'm going to piss some people off when I say this, but I don't care. I don't care. He still deserved to die. It just because it's sad that he was unaware doesn't make what he did when he was aware. He tried to take the coward's way out. All I see it as is they should have done it faster and he wouldn't have suffered as long. But he 100% deserved to die.
I also have mixed feelings because I don't feel like they should have gone through the life-saving efforts they did to do the brain surgery.
No, they shouldn't have. They should have just let him die.
I'm surprised whatever, and I get the officers that when they got there they were probably thinking the whole he's not getting away with it this easy, but it's like the amount of time, money, and effort that went into that. I can only imagine how much fucking brain surgery cost and how many hours that took, and then let alone the recovery time, all of that. For what?
Yeah.
He's gonna get put to death anyway. Congratulations, we just spent a fuck ton of money on nothing.
Yeah. I don't know. He deserved to die. It gets sad he wanted to save his little slice of pie, but he fucking deserves to die.
It made me glad because at first I thought it was going to take like a Green Mile turn and that like the officer threw his pie out and like he was real sad and of the mind of a small child, like it didn't need to be an upset, but I feel like they knew that there was something wrong with him. So I'm glad that they didn't do that one. Not to be sympathetic, because again, I have to keep reminding myself he's a fucking asshole. And really, it's a good thing it went the way that it did, because who knows how many more people he would have killed if he's going to be a trigger happy fool over $3.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't feel sorry for him. It might be sad that he wasn't aware, but then again, maybe that's better for him if you want to have compassion for his stupidity and his violence.
So it caused brain hole turmoil for me because, and I was trying to understand my own thoughts of why I had that turmoil, because I'd rather him know what's happening to the son bitch. Otherwise, what's the point of that punishment?
Yeah.
He doesn't get it. It takes the fun out of it.
You're sick.
I know, and that's why I was just like, huh. So I'm okay with the death penalty if they're aware of why we're killing you. But when you're not aware of it, well, that kind of takes the point out of it.
No, it sure doesn't. Not for me. Again, I stand by my just because he's not aware. It's more justice for the families of the people that he killed.
Yeah.
So who gives a shit about him? I don't care. If he didn't try to take the coward's way out and unsuccessfully try to commit suicide, then he would have been able to stand trial and been fully aware of what was going on, and he would have eaten his slice of pie.
I just feel like his attorneys did not do him justice, because you figure, why wouldn't they have put him on the stand? Because I feel like any jury would have been like, yeah, this guy. Not that I'm trying, I mean, he's already dead, so you can't unwind it. But I thought it was pretty crazy that he even stood trial. But I guess that just means the amount of crazy in Arkansas is real high that that's still competent.
Well, I think mainly what it was that he was competent when he did his crimes, like when he committed.
And that's not how that works.
It don't matter if that's how it works. I think that's the mentality.
It does matter. It's literally
right, but I'm just saying I think that's not how they looked at it.
Whether you're competent to stay in trial. I don't know how that was a thing twice. But I thought it was an interesting case, and I like that you chuckle at Bill Clinton.
How could you not? We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Homicide Hobbies. If we made you laugh, if we made you cry, or if we mind-fucked you for the day, then we thank you for listening. Please write a review on whatever you're listening to us on. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers. We're freaking awesome. And join us next week for another episode of Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy.
And I'm Claire.
That's all we've got.